Marky Bilson, Tri-City Sports Now. Again, Darren Kirkland Jr. returning to the Tennessee Volunteers as not media days, but the SEC meetings continue. Two things I got to look at. One, transfer rules. What about Brandon Kennedy? What's going on here? And I think, and more schools, it seems to be wishing to have open transfers. They really realize that, this is the reserve clause when you're trying to keep, players from transferring to one school or the other. And as I mentioned before, I talked about it when the Vols won the national title in '98. Brandon Stewart, who was destined to be Peyton Manning's backup, transferred to Texas A&M. And while at Texas A&M in his senior year, because he had to sit out a year because he transferred, so as a senior in the Big 12 title game, Texas A&M knocked off Kansas State. Otherwise, Kansas State would have played Tennessee for the national championship. Instead, Florida State came in. Florida State had a backup quarterback. It would have been far more difficult for Tennessee to have defeated Kansas State that year. And that was proven when 2 years later, Kansas State defeated Tennessee in a Cotton Bowl by a sizable amount of points. And so I really think that, you say, I don't want Kennedy to transfer to an SEC school where he could beat us. Well, what about this, Nick Saban? What about, theoretically, Kennedy comes to Tennessee and Tennessee defeats Auburn this year that you didn't see coming because of a great block that he springs that opens up a hole for the winning touchdown to be scored by Ty Chandler. What about it? And that allows you to win the SEC West. Could happen, just like Brandon Stewart, by transferring to another school, helped Tennessee win the national championship 20 years ago. Anyway, there's a story in a paper about Jeremy Pruitt, what he learned on the Big Orange Caravan, and likely what he learned was that Tennessee fans are passionate. I think he already knew that. He used to be an assistant here. That's the thing that comes out. Passion's good, don't get me wrong. Passion may be why Tennessee fans don't think, despite certain obstacles against the Vols, that a 4-8 season is the new future for Tennessee, even though there aren't as many players in Tennessee that are produced as there are most of the other SEC states. It's comparable to Missouri, for instance. And the revenues now are just about all the same, at least in terms of teams making a profit. So, yeah, a Vanderbilt can compete nowadays with a Tennessee. It's not all about, selling 100,000 seats. But still, the passion of the fan, a lot of boosters. Of course, one of those boosters, Jimmy Haslam, well, that's when passion, I guess, goes wrong. Anyway, told you that I was going to talk to you about Rick Barnes. Did he call one of his basketball players soft? John Fulkerson, former Dobbinsman and Indian, played his last 2 years at Christ School in North Carolina. Did he call him soft? Of course, Fulkerson has been just plagued with all kinds of injuries after he became a contributor back in 2015-16, as a matter of fact. He played at the Post 10 games of his freshman season back then, but then got hurt. And he's really struggled with injuries since then. Anyway, this is what Barnes had to say about Fulkerson now as he prepares to play after 2 years in Tennessee. Fact is, when I say Fulkerson missed 10 months due to injury, because of the nature of his injuries, he couldn't do a whole lot. He did as much as he possibly could with his lower body, and he needed that work, and I think that he benefited from it. But still, from the psychological standpoint, I do think it was tough on him. But I'm happy with the way he went after it in the spring. Kind of found that to be an interesting quote, psychologically. Yeah, I can see it's psychologically tough. It'd be psychologically tough for any player to miss up to 2 seasons due to injury. But do you also see where you're almost making a statement that, Fulkerson is soft? I mean, you got to be able to come back 100% from an injury. both physically and mentally. Psychologically, I guess it's always tough when you can't get out there and play if you're a gamer. If you're not Kyrie Irving, not going to the basketball game, that sort of thing. But, yeah, I did think, that's an interesting choice of words. Maybe I'm putting too much into it. Or maybe there's a reason more than injuries why Fulkerson hasn't necessarily played that much. You be the judge. I guess we'll find out as time goes by. By the way, one story I was very intrigued to read about was a story that Patrick Brown wrote over the weekend. Trevon Flowers is a pretty good football prospect coming to Tennessee, but he was enough of a baseball prospect that he might get drafted next June the 4th in the baseball draft. Another Todd Helton, perhaps. Another Burt Rechichar, because there is a lot of talk about Flowers playing both football and baseball for Tennessee. That'd be fun. By the way, other schools that were looking at the future defensive back for the Vols included Clemson, as I mentioned, but also Appalachian State and Illinois. So Donnie Abraham thought a lot of Flowers. Anyway, that's always something that's a lot of fun to see. I think when the player plays both football and baseball, speaks certainly well of his hand-eye coordination, plays middle infield. Now, like I said, he could very well be drafted, but this is kind of interesting. He said, I'll probably get picked, but I'm going to college. So consider, now this is kind of interesting here, Flowers, and remember that name, Trevon Flowers, when the draft comes about on June the 4th through the 6th. Because if Flowers is selected in the first day, that might change something. You get a lot of money up front in the bonus, and although I know there has been, because of the low pay that minor league baseball players make, a lot of statements that, you know what, you're paid more with a college football scholarship than you are when you are making, say, $600 a month or whatever. It's actually more than that. That was the independent league salary, but $1,000 a month playing minor league baseball, and it's not like it's even a 12-month job. Now, the difference is you do get a sizable signing bonus. But that's the thing. If Flowers is drafted early as an infielder, and let's say he gets $1 million signing bonus, I mean, that's tough to turn down. Especially if, say, he got hurt playing football and couldn't play sports again. Players like Flowers generally do sign an insurance contract. I've heard that, I think Peyton Manning had $10 million riding on him when he returned to play at Tennessee for his senior year. So in case he had a catastrophic injury, he'd still be a millionaire. You know, Lloyd's of London will do that, you know, that sort of thing. And, of course, his family, the Mannings, had enough money that they could afford such a policy. Okay, great. You know, Marcus Lattimore also had something like that when he suffered his catastrophic injury playing running back for South Carolina, and he never was able to play for the 49ers. So, you know, but anyway, be interesting. If Flowers is drafted in the later round, yeah, I do expect him to play both sports at Tennessee, just not enough money riding on him. But if he could get possibly a 7-figure bonus, that might change that. I'll probably get picked, but I'm going to college, quote, something to look to. So good news with Kirkland coming back, but will there be good news with Flowers not being drafted high? Or would you rather him drafted high? Tri-City Sports Now. Media Watch coming up.
WBMB Irwin, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.